On the broadcast tonight, worse than we thought, sobering news tonight about the American economy, the recession, and jobs. Deadly mix. Did the chemicals used to break up that oil in the Gulf do more harm than good? An NBC News investigation. The father of the bride arrives for his daughter's wedding. What's happening tonight in the small town with the big buzz and making a difference for the littlest survivors of Haiti's terrible earthquake and the American parents who are giving them a second chance at life? Nightly News begins now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Now to the oil disaster in the Gulf. News today that efforts to permanently plug the well have hit a snag. Workers found debris at the bottom of the relief well and will have to clean it out, pushing the final phase back about 36 hours. One of the questions everyone's been asking since the cap was put on that wild well, what happened to all that oil that spewed out? Well, one reason we can't see it, BP used a massive amount of chemical dispersant to break it up, which had some scientists warning that that could make things even worse for marine life. We've got NBC's senior investigative correspondent Lisa Myers now examining the evidence.
Since the spill, researchers from the Institute for Marine Mammal Studies, an independent research facility, have seen more distressed marine animals in the waters off Mississippi.
Right here.
Their biggest concern now, the dolphins.
What are you worried about the spill will do to the dolphins?
Well, ultimately, we're worried that they're going to die from it.
More than 250 sea turtles and dolphins have been found dead in the area and are bagged in makeshift morgues, now part of a federal investigation into what killed them.
How do you know where to pick a spot out, man? It's everywhere.
Some scientists worry that using dispersant to break up the oil may be a factor. It spreads the oil over a much larger area, making it hard for creatures to avoid it. Also, studies show that when the dispersant breaks up the oil, it can free the most toxic components, certain hydrocarbons, which spread throughout the water, exposing marine animals to more toxic components than if the oil hadn't been dispersed. A review of more than 400 studies since 1997 showed that 75% found the combination of oil and dispersant actually increased the toxic effects of the oil. Dr. Joe Griffith is a toxicologist at the University of Southern Mississippi.
Well, I think we all agree that the dispersed oil is more likely to be toxic than the crude oil by itself.
Last week, a group of independent scientists demanded an immediate halt to using dispersants in the Gulf, warning in this statement that they pose grave risks to marine life and human health.
Spray on. Spray on.
Since the spill, the government has approved the use of an unprecedented 1.8 million gallons of dispersant sprayed on the surface and into the well below, mostly Corexit 9500. Little is known about the effect of these chemicals applied in such great amounts or at this depth, 5,000 feet. So far, the scientific community hasn't reached conclusions about how all this is impacting marine life in the Gulf. But law firms suing BP on behalf of Louisiana fishermen and environmentalists have conducted tests, preparing to do battle in court. Tests, they say, produce troubling results. Dr. William Sawyer, a toxicologist, is part of a team of scientists hired by the law firms who collected and analyzed globs of oil, sand, and water at these sites in 4 states along the Gulf.
We now have compelling evidence that the dispersant has enhanced and increased the toxicity from the spill.
Sawyer says tests show that some water now contains high levels of toxic components, which can be especially harmful to early stages of marine life.
It is selectively picking out the most toxic hydrocarbons in crude oil and maintaining those in the water on a long-term basis.
Which makes this even more deadly to marine life?
Much so.
Other scientists told NBC that Sawyer's theory appears valid, but can't be proven conclusively without testing the mixture of oil and dispersant on marine life. BP says dispersants have been very effective in keeping oil from reaching shore, and that it's working closely with the government to monitor the environmental impact. NALCO, which makes Corexit, says the EPA has concluded that use of dispersants has not significantly affected the marine environment. Because of potential litigation, the EPA hasn't seen all of Sawyer's data, but the agency says it's now conducting its own tests. to determine just how toxic dispersants mixed with oil are to life in the Gulf. Lisa Myers, NBC News, Grand Isle, Louisiana.